Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning into News9 Live, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kabir Naqvi. Joining me here in the studio is my colleague Nancy Bora, and what we're essentially going to be decoding, unpacking and analyzing is what has happened at the Gaza-Israel war on day 12, even as we're learning that at least 500 Palestinians have been killed in that latest bombing in a hospital in the Gaza Strip. We're bringing you this broadcast live from our studios here in the national capital, styled exclusively by Paul Moll, ladies and gentlemen. Getting down to the top update of this news hour, and we're bringing you all the latest details and developments right on the top. Take a look at this. More than 500 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. That is what the Palestinian Authority is alleging. The Israeli Defense Force clearly coming out and saying that it's your own people that misfired a rocket at that Gaza hospital. Meanwhile, 500 people dead. Israel claims Hamas misfired the rocket that hit that particular hospital. Biden, on the other hand, says he's outraged by the bombing of the hospital, so global players certainly talking about it. Palestine President Abbas has cancelled his meeting with Joe Biden after the Gaza hospital strike. Jordan has also cancelled its summit. At least 6 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the UNRWA school in Gaza, ladies and gentlemen. And also Israel says that it's ready to fight on 2 fronts. This even as the IDF warns the Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that 2-front war certainly turning into a reality, it seems. On the other hand, the humanitarian crisis deepens as Gazans dig for survivors and their loved ones amidst the rubble from their dilapidated skyline. It's all turning into rubble and dust. Hundreds of Jordanians, on the other hand, showed support for Palestinians on the eve of Biden's visit, even as in various Israeli embassies in Ankara were gherawed, and there were a lot of protests that were held on this particular facet as well. But, ladies and gentlemen, on Tuesday, a massive explosion rocked the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital. And we'll show you visuals of that. The Al-Ahli Arab Hospital was filled with hundreds of Palestinians seeking shelter. Take a look at that moment. The moment when the bomb went off at the Al-Ahli Hospital. Now the hospital was filled with hundreds of Palestinians that were seeking shelter in the besieged Gaza Strip. At least 500. It's being feared that at least 500 people have lost their lives due to the hospital bombing. It's been one of the deadliest attacks in the Israel-Gaza conflict in the last 5 to 6 decades. Now both Israel and Hamas have exchanged accusations on this front. Israel said the hospital blast caused by rockets was misfired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while Hamas accused Israel of carrying out the airstrike. Now the scene of the explosion was certainly devastating. People running from pillar to post, with patients, with people who got wounded because of the Gaza bombing. As captured in these videos that showed fire engulfing the building and reducing it to complete rubble. What you're looking at are visuals of people being transported from Al-Ahli Arab Hospital to Al-Shifa Hospital, where people started. The influx was so soon, and all the immediate reports only spoke about how per minute there were at least 3 to 4 patients that were being added at the Al-Shifa Hospital. Al-Ahli Arab Hospital that was bombed, and then Al-Shifa Hospital where people were continuously being transported. Now, according to reports, among the victims, there were also many children who had sought refuge in that hospital. And not just children, a lot of people that had sought refuge in that hospital as well. So, in totality, about 500 Palestinians that were killed in a blast inside the Gaza hospital. Here's a report. Take a look at it for yourself.
Hundreds of people have been killed in an explosion at a Gaza hospital, according to Palestinian health authorities. They say it was caused by an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military is blaming a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. Reuters cannot immediately verify either version of events. Tuesday's strike on the Al-Ahli Al-Arabi hospital marks the single bloodiest event in Gaza of the war between Israel and Islamist militants. Gaza authorities say more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including hundreds of children, and that over 1 million have been driven from their homes. This video obtained by Reuters shows paramedics transporting wounded from the hospital to another facility elsewhere in the city. Gaza is run by Hamas, whose attack on Israeli communities earlier this month killed 1,300 people and took many hostages who are still being held. The retaliatory air campaign by Israel has been relentless, flattened entire districts, and stoked a humanitarian crisis.
Well, now, Nancy, it's important to note that because of the Gaza hospital bombing, Joe Biden, President of the United States, he's en route Israel. And on the other hand, Jordan, they've cancelled their summit with the United States. On the other hand, you've got the Palestinian Authority and that president of Palestine, Abbas, who's not going to be meeting, the President of the United States.
I mean, when we talk about it, I mean, the US is extending their support in Israel from the start, whether it's Anthony Blinken, whether it's Lloyd Austin. Everybody is just going there and trying to help out. We saw Anthony Blinken give a tour to other countries as well. And now Biden was also planning to visit Israel. And I think after the bombing in Gaza, the hospital bombing, I think it has shook the entire world, because this is hospital we are talking about, and the casualty, the number of death toll is mounting up. As we
saw the people that were coming in, that ambulance that came in.
Definitely.
Now, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, he has cancelled a planned meeting with US President Joe Biden. This has come right after the Israeli strike, well, the alleged Israeli strike on a Gaza hospital that killed hundreds last evening. The meeting was scheduled to take place in Jordan, so that Jordan summit has been cancelled. Now, Abbas was returning to Ramallah, the seat of his government in West Bank, to take stock of the situation. And Israel had declared war on Hamas earlier this month after a surprise attack that killed more than 1,400 Israelis and took around at least 200 hostages back with them inside the Gaza Strip. The retaliatory airstrikes have been relentless and have since then killed more than 2,800 people, and that number has only gone up after the latest hospital bombing. Israel has also imposed a crippling siege on Gaza and deployed tens of thousands of troops at the border. A ground invasion, a ground offensive is on the cards, certainly. Well, now, fearing a possible military escalation between Lebanon's Shiite group Hezbollah and the Israeli military, many Lebanese in the south of their country have fled. According to eyewitnesses, several villages have now been completely deserted.
This school in the city of Tyre has become a refuge for dozens of families and their children after they fled their villages in southern Lebanon. Mahmoud Nassar also felt forced to leave his home. He was concerned for the safety of his children.
For me, death is easier. Believe me when I tell you that. I do not fear for myself, as I am 51 years old. But I fear for the children.
Mahmoud's situation is like that of other displaced people here. After repeated shelling on the Lebanese-Israeli border, they all moved quickly to leave their homes.
A shell fell on someone's house in our village, and after the bombing continued near us, we gathered our belongings and left.
The disaster management unit in Tyre formed an operations room after the number of displaced people from neighbouring villages reached 900. For now, they are staying in 2 of the city's schools. There's no other shelter centre here.
It's difficult for us to meet the needs of all these people. We neither have the capacity nor the resources, and we are unable to provide them with food and medicine. We need support from the international community.
The official institutions in the city of Tyre have shut their doors because of the precarious security situation in the city and for fear of what more is to come.
Well, meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, hundreds of relatives of people being held hostage in Gaza by the Hamas terrorist group gathered for a protest rally. They called on the Israeli government to bring back their loved ones. Take a look.
A sign for every hostage. More than a week after Hamas struck Israel with terror, killing and kidnapping civilians, people have come together here in Tel Aviv. Some are blaming the government. Others came in solidarity with victims' families. Maya Asraf belongs to one of them. The 24-year-old is missing 6 of her own family members.
At around 10:30 a.m., terrorists entered their home, dozens of them, armed with knives, waving the knives at them and shouting. I spoke with Daron in the last minute, and she sent me a recording. Mai, there are terrorists here. We are alone. They are shouting.
Doron Katz is her aunt. She was taken together with her small daughters Aviv and Raz. They were visiting family in Niroz, a kibbutz close to Gaza. Ravid Katz, the uncle, is missing too, as is his elderly mother Efrat and her husband Gad Moshe Moses.
I'm here because my family has no voice right now. They are dead or kidnapped. I'm here to be their voice. I expect from the world the maximum amount of intervention.
She learned what happened through a Hamas TikTok video. Mai tells us her aunt's phone was later located in Gaza. The situation is desperate. Mai's aunt is a German citizen, but in her situation, that doesn't help. It wasn't just Israelis that Hamas killed and kidnapped. 43 different nationalities were represented among their hostages.
As many as 150 people have been abducted and are believed to still being held hostage in Gaza. Their families don't know where they are, how they are doing, and if they're even still alive.
People in Israel are united in the conviction that there needs to be a response. But what exactly this should look like, at least at this protest, isn't clear.
The Israeli government must focus first of all on doing whatever is necessary in order to release the hijacked people. Instead of focusing on trying to do some kind of revenge or whatever they are trying to do.
I think the only option we have now, unfortunately, it's to clear Gaza.
So many people in Israel understand that this blood circle is not the solution. It never was, it never will be.
At this point, though, the bloodshed seems like it is far from over.
Well, that was the family members of Israelis whose relatives are stuck in Israel, and they're praying so that they can return back to home safely. But our team is deployed in the ground zero of Israel-Palestinian conflicts, and they are bringing us latest updates from the ground zero. Take a look.
ऑपरेशन से ठीक पहले अपना जोश बढ़ाते हुए एक दूसरे का और सैनिकों को देखिए जो इस वक्त ऑपरेशन से पहले किस तरह जोश में और समझिए कि वो हमास को क्या मैसेज दे रहे हैं। वो साफ तौर पर ये कह रहे हैं कि वो तैयार हैं उस लड़ाई के लिए जो इजराइल के लिए, इजराइल के अस्तित्व के लिए सबसे बड़ी और खतरनाक लड़ाई हो सकती है। और उसके लिए इस वक्त आप देखिए, जब कहते हैं आप कि हाउ इज द जोश, तो ये देखिए जो जोश इनका इस वक्त आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। ये सोल्जर्स जो इस जगह पर मौजूद हैं और उनके बीच आपने देखा कि किस तरीके से ये सब एक दूसरे के साथ अपना मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए और एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट करते हुए, क्योंकि इन्हें पता है कि ये किस असाइनमेंट पर जा रहे हैं और वो असाइनमेंट कितना डेंजरस होगा। सो आपने इनके जोश और जज्बे को देखा और इसी जज्बे के साथ ये ग्राउंड ऑपरेशन के लिए आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और इन्हीं लोगों को आगे जाकर गाजा स्ट्रिप में सुरंगों के भीतर से घुस कर हमास के आतंकियों को सफाया करना है। इन्हीं लोगों को, उन बंधकों की रिहाई करनी है, इन्हीं लोगों को जाकर अपने दुश्मनों के बीच में से जाकर अपने इजरायली लोगों को छुड़ा कर लाना है। और उससे पहले ये लोग एक दूसरे का मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए यहाँ पर ठीक बॉर्डर के पास मौजूद हैं, जहाँ से हम आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं इनके जोश को, इनके जज्बे को, ताकि आप देख सकें और समझ सकें कि अभी फिलहाल इजराइल के बॉर्डर की स्थिति क्या है।
Well, so the soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, certainly their morale, it seems, is high. One of them, Nancy, was speaking to one of the media agencies and saying, for the first time in my life, he seems like that person had a purpose. This is what the Israelis are feeling, that unification that now this war has brought out. Meanwhile, with Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians trapped inside Gaza, overseas family members of innocent people caught in the conflict at this moment feel powerless. In Brussels, where the European Union is headquartered, our reporter has put out this package. Take a look.
After a moment of silence, Israel's national anthem echoes through quiet crowds outside the European Parliament in Brussels.
We are here with the President of the European Council, the President of the European Commission, and all of you as one to express our solidarity.
Inside, a group of Israelis bustles between meetings with parliamentarians, making the case for more action. We meet Noam as she lays out photos of loved ones, 11 of whom are presumed kidnapped by Hamas.
Look at this family, okay? They are not only Israelis. Many of them, Shushan, she's a German citizen as well. We're really asking for the EU to take responsibility and bring their citizens back home.
After the horrors, now the wait is agonizing.
They burned all the houses, they killed everyone, and they took them, and we are just trying to save whoever is still alive.
The European Union says it stands with Israel, but the bloc has also warned the country against blocking supplies to Gaza.
Cutting water, cutting electricity, cutting food to a mass of civilian people is against international law. So yes, there are some actions that are not in accordance with international law.
That's why Leila Wafi is terrified too. Hailing from Gaza, we meet her at her home outside Brussels as she frantically tries to get family members out of the strip. But they're trapped.
Where can they hide? They've nowhere to run to. They're starting to run out of milk, bread, drinking water.
Leila rejects the actions of Hamas and the Israeli response.
Killing civilians has never advanced the Palestinian cause. We've always said too that killing Palestinian civilians does not make Israel safer. On both sides now we are weeping mothers. We are parents searching for our children. We are both at the mercy of extremist politics. We share the same pain, but in opposing camps.
For now, all those watching from afar can do is hold on, whether taking solace in a whispered prayer for peace or a song of hope hanging in the air.
Well, so even as people are waiting and hoping and praying for their loved ones and relatives that have been taken hostage by the Hamas back into the Gaza Strip, Rafah crossing is one point of exit from the Gaza Strip that is not solely well administered by Israel. It has Egypt as a stakeholder as well. Will people be allowed to and fro from that particular crossing point? When and how soon can aid come in for the Gazans? Well, my colleague Manisha brings us this report from the Rafah crossing.
TV9 भारतवर्ष की टीम इस वक्त राफा क्रॉसिंग पर है। ये वो जगह है जो इजराइल का वो पॉइंट है जहां पर गाजा पट्टी और इजिप्ट के बीच का रास्ता खुलता है। फिलहाल दुनिया के केंद्र में बन गया है ये जगह, वो इसलिए क्योंकि गाजा पट्टी में 600 के करीब अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं। इसके अलावा जो तमाम विदेशी गाजा पट्टी में फंसे हैं उनको निकालने के लिए अमेरिका और दूसरे देश चाहते हैं कि राफा क्रॉसिंग के जरिए इजिप्ट में निकलने का उनको मौका दिया जाए। वहीं दूसरी तरफ इजिप्ट में सैकड़ों की संख्या में ट्रक राहत सामग्री लेकर इंतजार कर रहे हैं कि वो गाजा पट्टी के अंदर घुसे। ये सब कुछ होगा कहां से? इस जगह से जहां पर टीवी 9 का कैमरा आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। वहीं दूसरी तरफ देखिए, जो लगातार यहां पर ट्रैफिक है उसमें लगातार जो आर्मी के व्हीकल्स हैं, टैंक और दूसरी और तमाम चीज़ें दिखाई देती है। बहुत बड़ा बेस यहाँ पर है जहाँ पर कि मैंने खुद ही हजारों के करीब में सोल्जर्स को देखा। तो ये रफा क्रॉसिंग के पॉइंट से टीवी 9 आपको रिपोर्ट करके बता रहा है कि आज की तारीख में सिचुएशन क्या है। और खबर यही है कि अभी फिलहाल जब ईरान के विदेश मंत्री ने यह दावा किया है कि हमास अपने 200 बंधकों को छोड़ने के लिए तैयार है, बशर्ते कि हमास की शर्त मानी जाए और इजराइल एयर स्ट्राइक न करे। इन सब के केंद्र बिंदु में अब अगले डेवलपमेंट का इंतजार है, जब राफा क्रॉसिंग में बहुत कुछ आपको देखने को मिलेगा। सबसे पहले जो अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं उनकी रिहाई इस क्रॉसिंग से होते हुए दिखेगी।
And amidst all of this, ladies and gentlemen, United States President, he's en route Israel. Earlier, Anthony Blinken was here. He did that marathon meetings, various Arab nations and the leaders that he met with. Today, he's supposed to come in, and the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian president has said that he is not going to be meeting the US president. What does this mean? Take a look.
As Israeli airstrikes continue to pound Gaza following the bloody attack by Hamas earlier this month, the United States stepped up support for Israel on Tuesday with plans for a visit by the president.
President Biden will visit Israel.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the plans for Biden to visit this Wednesday.
The president will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. The president will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
Blinken is himself in Tel Aviv, where he spent hours on Monday in talks with Israel's war cabinet. He said the US and Israel would work on plans to get humanitarian aid into Gaza and highlighted Biden's order for US military assets to head to the region to back Israel up.
President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't.
The warning comes hours after Iran's foreign minister threatened consequences for what he called Israel's war crimes committed against the people of Gaza. Referring to regional forces opposed to Israel and the US as the resistance, Hussein Amir Abdullahian told state TV, quote, "The resistance front is capable of waging a long-term war with the enemy. In the coming hours, we can expect a preemptive action by the resistance front." Meanwhile, Hamas hinted on Monday it may try to use the people its fighters kidnapped from Israel for a prisoner swap. Khaled Mishal, a top Hamas leader, told a Qatari TV channel that the group, quote, has what it needs to free all Palestinians in Israeli prisons, roughly 6,000 people. Israel says Hamas took 199 hostages to Gaza, while the militant group says it has between 200 and 250 captives abducted from Israel during its fighters' surprise attack on October 7th. In separate comments on Monday, the group's armed wing said the non-Israelis in their captive were guests who would be released, quote, when circumstances allow.
Well, my colleague Manish, he's in Israel to reiterate for everybody out there, and he's bringing us those actual reports of what it is like at those border points. At a campsite, people have come in and they're helping the Israeli soldiers. Here's a report.
बॉर्डर पर अलग अलग हिस्सों में जाते हुए टीवी 9 की टीम को एक ऐसी लोकेशन पर आने का मौका मिला है जहां पर कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में हम सोल्जर्स को भी देख रहे हैं, और यहां पर कुछ जो संस्थाएं हैं वो यहाँ पर खाने का और दूसरी जो चीज़ें हैं वो इकट्ठा कर रही है. हाय सर, so I am Manisha from TV9. I am coming from India. So what is going on here?
Actually, what's happening here is going on very fast. We started last Sunday, a group of 6 people. We made 300 dishes. We bring our own money to start to do something good for the army. By Monday, we were 12 people, and we made about 600 dishes.
Can you show us how you guys are doing?
Of course, and by Thursday, we became a group of 500 people, making 10,000 dishes a day, only for the soldier who fight.
Okay, और मैं आपको बता दूं कि सिक्योरिटी की वजह से हम लोग लोकेशन नहीं दिखा रहे हैं कि हम कहां पर हैं, ये नहीं बता रहे हैं. यहाँ पर जो दर्जनों की नहीं बल्कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में जो सोल्जर्स हैं उनको किस तरह से वो खाना प्रोवाइड करा रहे हैं और फिर ये लोग खाने के पैकेट सब लेकर और फिर यहाँ से वो आगे बढ़ते हैं, क्योंकि ठीक यहाँ से कुछ दूरी पर स्थित जो लोग हैं जिनको युद्ध में यहाँ पर डिप्लॉय किया गया है, उन सबको खाना मिल सके उसके लिए। ये एक ऐसी जगह है क्योंकि जंग के दौरान आपको सब कुछ चाहिए, आपको हथियार चाहिए, आपको तमाम तरह के रसद सामग्री चाहिए, लेकिन साथ ही साथ आपको खाने पीने की चीज़ें भी चाहिए, क्योंकि किसी को नहीं पता कि ये जंग कितनी लंबी चलने वाली है। और वैसी स्थिति में जब आप जंग के दरमियान देखते हैं कि किस तरह से आम लोग, आम इजरायली, तमाम जो इजरायली लोगों का संगठन है वो किस तरह से आगे बढ़कर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहा है, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि जो लोग इस वक्त मातृभूमि की रक्षा के लिए आए हैं उनको वो इसी रूप में शायद मदद कर सकते हैं। What's your good name?
Alma. We're both Alma.
Okay. So would you like to say something? What you guys are doing?
We're helping and making food for the soldiers.
Okay.
And hope for the best for Israel. And yes.
तो आप इस वक्त देखिए एक तरफ अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग हैं, अलग अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग इस वक्त यहाँ पर मौजूद होकर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहे हैं और वो मदद करने के लिए उन्हें लग रहा है कि अगर वो कुछ नहीं तो खाना पीना ही प्रोवाइड करके मदद कर सके। क्या है इजराइल की तैयारी, कितना है इजराइल के लोगों में जोश, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि ये उनकी वो लड़ाई है जिसके लिए हर इजरायली को आगे आना होगा। हर इजरायली हर रूप में, किसी के हाथ में हथियार है तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जा रहा है तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जाने वाले लोगों को खाना और दूसरी चीज़ें मुहैया करा रहा है, ताकि वो इस देश की रक्षा के लिए, अपने तमाम इजरायली लोगों की रक्षा के लिए पूरी ताकत के साथ लड़ सके। इस वक्त TV9 की टीम आपको वो दिखाने की कोशिश कर रही है कि देखिए किस तरह से आम इजरायली और सैनिक एक दूसरे के साथ हैं। यहाँ पर लोग गाना गा के भी मनोबल भी बढ़ाते हैं, खाना पीना भी दे रहे हैं और यहाँ से अपने सैनिकों को विदा करते हैं फ्रंट लाइन पर जाने के लिए, इस उम्मीद के साथ कि अगले वक्त खाना खाने के लिए दोबारा से सोल्जर्स यहाँ पर पहुँच सके। तो यहाँ पर एक आराम करने की भी जगह है और साथ ही साथ यहाँ पर देखिए सबके लिए ये अस्तित्व की लड़ाई है और इस बात को समझते हुए हर कोई अपने अपने हिसाब से इसे कंट्रीब्यूट करने में लगा है, ताकि इजराइल जो अपना इतिहास रहा है उसी इतिहास को दोहराते हुए एक बार फिर इस मुश्किल की घड़ी में तमाम संकटों का सामना करके आगे बढ़ सके।
So preparations, it seems, are plentiful for the Israeli Defense Forces, like Manish puts out there. But for the Israeli Defense Force, it could be a two-pronged war, a two-front war. On the north, you've got the Hezbollah to deal with as well. Now, Lebanon's Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days, threatening to expand the conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas.
Lebanon's militant group Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days, threatening to expand a conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas. But what is Hezbollah? Iran's Revolutionary Guards founded Hezbollah in 1982 in the middle of Lebanon's civil war. It was part of Iran's effort to export its Islamic revolution around the region and fight Israeli forces after their invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah shares Tehran's Shiite Islamist ideology and went on to recruit Lebanese Shiite Muslims. The group has risen from a shadowy faction to a heavily armed force with major sway over the Lebanese state. It has ministers in government and lawmakers in parliament. Western countries, including the United States, designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. The US holds the group responsible for a suicide bombing that destroyed US Marine headquarters in Beirut in 1983, killing 241 servicemen. And Lebanese security officials and Western intelligence have said groups linked to Hezbollah carried out suicide attacks on Western embassies and kidnapped Westerners in the 1980s. Hezbollah leaders said those attacks were carried out by small groups not linked to Hezbollah. In 2021, Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah said the group had 100,000 fighters. Iran gives Hezbollah weapons and money. The US estimates Iran has allocated it hundreds of millions of dollars annually in recent years. Hezbollah boasts weapons including precision rockets and drones. It demonstrated its military advances in 2006 during a 5-week war with Israel. It fired thousands of rockets into Israel during the conflict. 1,200 people were killed in Lebanon, mostly civilians, and more than 150 Israeli were killed, most of them soldiers. Many Lebanese Shiites support Hezbollah, saying the group defends Lebanon from Israel. However, Lebanese parties opposed to Hezbollah say the group unilaterally drags Lebanon into armed conflict. Hezbollah has deep ties to Hamas, another Palestinian faction backed by Iran. On October 7th, the day Hamas militants carried out an unprecedented assault into Israel, Hezbollah said it was in direct contact with the leadership of the Palestinian resistance. Since then, Hezbollah has exchanged cross-border fire with Israel numerous times.
Well, Kabir, the biggest headline that was, that has shook the whole country and shook the whole world at this point is that how there was a bombing at a hospital where people were taking refuge. I mean, where does the civilians go? They go to the hospital when they want to take refuge, when they want, that is where they go when they want to have that, they want to get the treatment. And now that we are getting the news that 500 people at least have been killed in the Gaza bombing, I mean, although both of the sides are blaming each other, they are trading charges between them that, the Hamas is saying that it was the Israeli airstrike and the Israel is saying that it was the it was the Palestinian militant groups that is behind this war, behind this attack. I mean, but it's the civilians who are actually taking the toll of the conflict between both the groups. Take a look at this report.
Hundreds of people have been killed in an explosion at a Gaza hospital, according to Palestinian health authorities. They say it was caused by an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military is blaming a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. Reuters cannot immediately verify either version of events. Tuesday's strike on the Al-Ahli Al-Arabi hospital marks the single bloodiest event in Gaza of the war between Israel and Islamist militants. Gaza authorities say more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including hundreds of children, and that over 1 million have been driven from their homes. This video obtained by Reuters shows paramedics transporting wounded from the hospital to another facility elsewhere in the city. Gaza is run by Hamas, whose attack on Israeli communities earlier this month killed 1,300 people and took many hostages who are still being held. The retaliatory air campaign by Israel has been relentless, flattened entire districts, and stoked a humanitarian crisis.
People running from pillar to post from Al-Shifa Hospital, then transferring all those patients, well, to Al-Shifa hospitals from Al-Ahli Arab Hospital. But on the other side of the divide, in Tel Aviv, my colleague has filed in this ground report because sirens were heard blaring in Tel Aviv as well. Take a look.
एक बार फिर से तेल अवीव में सायरन बजे हैं। 15 मिनट पहले एक बार सायरन हुए थे, रॉकेट से हमला किया था, और अब एक बार फिर से सायरन बजे हैं, रॉकेट से हमला किया जा रहा है। और इस वक्त अगर आपको मैं बताऊं तो प्रेसिडेंट जो बाइडेन के आने से ठीक पहले जिस तरीके से तेल अवीव में लगातार महज 20 मिनट के अंदर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हमले हुए हैं, उससे आप समझ सकते हैं कि हालत क्या है। और इस वक्त देखिए लोग जिस तरीके से यहाँ पर पहले लोग भागते हुए दिखे, सब अपने अपने सुरक्षित ठिकानों की तरफ बैठते हुए, और TV9 की टीम इस वक्त ग्राउंड पर मौजूद है, तेल अवीव में मौजूद है। तेल अवीव में रहकर मैं इस वक्त आपको बता सकता हूं कि यहाँ की हालत क्या है। देखिए लगातार सायरन की आवाज़ और धड़ाम, और देखिए इस वक्त आवाज़ लगता है बहुत पास में ही कहीं पर आवाज़ हुई है, बहुत पास में ही, और रॉकेट के हमले की आवाज़ आई और धड़ाम से इसका मतलब है कि आयरन डोम ने उसे मार गिराया है। और आप सोचिए आधे घंटे के अंदर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हमले, और वो भी बेहद करीब में, उस जगह पर जहां पर IDF का हेडक्वार्टर है, तेल अवीव के सिटी सेंटर के आसपास के इलाके में। जिस तरह से आयरन डोम ने मार गिराया रॉकेट को, उससे आप अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि किस तरीके से हमास लगातार तेल अवीव को टारगेट कर रहा है, और वो भी तब जब अमेरिकी राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेन तेल अवीव पहुँचने वाले हैं महज कुछ घंटों के बाद। एक तरफ जहाँ अमेरिका के राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेन ने ऐलान किया कि वो इजराइल के दौरे पर निकल रहे हैं, अमेरिका से अपनी यात्रा उन्होंने शुरू की, और ठीक उसी समय में यहाँ पर जो बाइडेन के विजिट के से महज कुछ घंटे पहले तेल अवीव में लगातार आधे घंटे के भीतर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हुए हमले, ये अपने आप में हमास और इजराइल की जंग की वो कहानी बयां कर रहा है जिसको देखकर देखिए अचानक ही सायरन बजने के बाद पूरा सन्नाटा पड़ गया था। सारी जगह पर अचानक लोगों ने जो जहां पर मिला उस वक्त गाड़ियां छोड़कर वो सीधे सुरक्षित ठिकानों पर भागे और उसके बाद अब आयरन डोम ने उसको मार गिराया और अब चीज़ें नॉर्मल हो रही है ताकि लोग फिर सुरक्षित ठिकानों से बाहर निकलकर अपनी अपनी गाड़ी और दूसरी चीज़ों को लेकर फिर अपने डेस्टिनेशन की तरफ जा रहे हैं।
Well, now what Manisha's report tells us are two very important things. Number one, that it's so normal for people that the sirens are blaring in that particular area. People have left their cars, and as soon as the sirens stop blaring and that attack and that blast noise goes away, they sit down in their cars and buses start to ply again. People start crossing the roads again. Secondly, you've got United States President Joe Biden, who's en route to Israel. And if he's in Tel Aviv and the sirens are blaring, how does and what does that mean? Meanwhile, on the other hand, you've got Sumit, our other colleague, who's on the front lines. Take a look what he's bringing us.
और इस समय एक बार फिर TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको लेकर आया है यहाँ पर फ्रंट लाइन के एरिया के अंदर, और मैं आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि इस समय टैंक्स और आर्टिलरी किस तरीके से तैयारी कर रही है इन इलाकों में जाने की। अगर आप देखें, ये टैंक्स है जो करीबन हैवी टैंक्स है इसके, और अभी थोड़ी देर में टैंक्स मूव किए जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देखें, सैनिक लगातार तैयारी कर रहे हैं फ्रंट लाइन पे जाने की, और ये पहली तस्वीरें TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा है और ये भी बता रहा है कि आखिरकार इस समय क्या तैयारियां यहाँ चल रही हैं। और मैं इस समय मौजूद हूँ, देख रहे हैं, आप देख रहे हो कि ये मार्क 4 टैंक्स हैं इजरायली सेना के, और अभी इनका इस्तेमाल खास तौर पर किया जा रहा है युद्ध के क्षेत्रों में, और इन टैंक्स और आर्टिलरी गन्स के साथ मैं यहाँ मौजूद हूँ और मैं आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि आखिरकार इस समय कैसे ताज़ा माहौल हालात हैं यहाँ पर। अगर आप देखें, वो लगातार लाइव फायर वहाँ से किया जा रहा है आर्टिलरी गन से और टैंक्स की मदद से। और अगर अब ये आप तस्वीरें मैं और मेरे कैमरा पर्सन आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हो तो क्या इस समय मौजूद हैं, क्या इस तरीके से सपोर्ट दिया जा रहा है, ये भी आप देख सकते हैं। देखिए, ये वो लोकेशंस है जहाँ से लगातार इस समय फायर किया जा रहा है, और मैं अकेला TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको ऐसा चैनल है जो आपको लगातार इन इलाकों से ये तस्वीरें दिखा रहा है। अगर आप देखें, एक और फिर तैयारी की जा रही है, शेल्स को डाला जा रहा है और उसके बाद उसको फायर किया जाएगा, और हम आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि इस समय इजरायली सेना किस तरीके से अपनी तैयारियां कर रही है। और ये आपके लिए देखना बहुत ज़रूरी है क्योंकि आप ये देखकर समझ सकते हैं कि अभी किस तरीके की तैयारियां यहाँ पर चल रही है। देखकर आप एक बार फिर से अभी एक रॉकेट से यानी RPG से लगातार फायर किया जा रहा है, और मोटे तौर पर अगर आप देखें तो यहाँ पर किस तरीके से एनिमी लोकेशंस को टारगेट किया जा रहा है, इसकी पहली तस्वीरें हम आप तक दिखा रहे हैं। यानी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है एक बार फिर आपके लिए समझना कि अभी जो गाज़ा पट्टी में किस तरीके की स्ट्रैटेजीज इस समय इजरायली सेना की है। और अगर आप देखें कि रॉकेट लॉन्चर्स या फिर दूसरी RT शेल्स की मदद से लगातार इस तरीके के फायर किए जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देख रहे हैं कि अभी इसी तरीके से एक रॉकेट को उसकी मुठा में डाला गया और अब से थोड़ी देर में उसको दोबारा से फायर किया जाएगा। ये इसलिए क्योंकि अलग अलग लोकेशंस पे किस तरीके से फायर किया जा रहा है, क्या लोकेशंस है, ये आपके लिए देखना और समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है। देखिए, कई पैराफेरल यानी कई फ्रंटलाइंस लोकेशंस को तैयार किया गया है, ऐसी फ्रंटलाइंस लोकेशंस को जो इस समय गाज़ा पट्टी के बेहद करीब है, और इन्हीं फ्रंटलाइन लोकेशन से फायर किया जा रहा है। अभी आप मोटे तौर पे समझिए कि इनकी जो रेंज है यानी फर्स्ट लेयर जो आपकी कह सकते हैं कि ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस, ये फर्स्ट लेयर ऑफ ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस है जहां से ये फायर किया जा रहा है। अगर आप एक बार फिर अगर देखें और आपको समझ में आएगा कि अभी क्या कुछ ताज़ा हालात हैं यहाँ के। हालांकि देखिए, हमको बोला गया है कि देखिए, अगर आप देखें, ये फायर करने वाला है थोड़ी देर में, और इसके बाद यहाँ से इन लोकेशंस को बदला जाता है। देखिए, ये कोशिश की जाती है डिफेंस फोर्सेस में कि जब आप फायर कर लें तो वहाँ से दूसरी लोकेशन की तरफ निकल जाएं, क्योंकि एक बार आपकी लोकेशन को ट्रैक कर लिया, आपको पता लग गया, तो फिर आपके लिए बेहद मुश्किल हो जाता है। देखिए, अगर फिर मैं आपको बता रहा था कि किस तरीके की तैयारी यहाँ पर इस समय फोर्सेज की, और देखिए कुछ ही देर में फायर करने वाला। और अगर आप देखें, आपको नज़र आएगा कि ये फायरिंग चल रही है। इस समय मौजूद हूँ मैं इस समय फ्रंट लाइन के उन ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस में जहाँ से फोर्सेस का ये टारगेट किया जा रहा है। यानी एक बार फिर TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको ऐसा चैनल है जो आपको लगातार इन लोकेशन से दिखा रहा है, बता रहा है कि आखिरकार किस तरीके की चीजें इस समय यहां पर मौजूद है।
Meanwhile, it seems like the IDF will have extra support as well, as the United States has picked up troops to prepare for potential deployment to the Middle East. The US military has selected roughly 2,000 troops to prepare for a potential deployment, this to support Israel. Now, US defense officials have confirmed this report as well. The troops are tasked with missions like advising and medical support and they are from across the United States' armed services. Now, it's important to note here that these troops aren't intended to serve in a combat role. No infantry, particularly, has been put on prepare to deploy order. Now, the troops are currently stationed both inside the Middle East and outside, including Europe. And it isn't clear under what circumstances the US could deploy the troops or to where. But the Pentagon's decision has signaled it is preparing to support Israeli troops should Israel launch a ground incursion into Gaza. Now, it is unclear how many of these troops should they be deploying. Would they go to Israel? But the official said that at least some of them could enter the country to support Israeli forces. A pre-deployment order doesn't necessarily mean the troops will certainly deploy, but rather shortens the time troops need to be ready to move. Now, US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he was earlier in Israel. He met US troops earlier and checked in on the shipment of supplies for the Israeli Defense Forces. He had told the troops when he met them that he appreciated their work and said that the Israelis would likely, quote unquote, need a lot more stuff. Now, US President Joe Biden is expected to visit Israel today for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and to make clear Israel has the right to defend itself, according to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who made the announcement of his arrival. Now, Biden is going to reaffirm solidarity with Israel as it prepares for a ground offensive against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. And Blinken also said that after lengthy talks with Netanyahu, this meeting has come about. The Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers as well to the Eastern Mediterranean, the Ford carrier and the Eisenhower carrier, along with their supporting ships.
On Wednesday, President Biden will visit Israel. He's coming here at a critical moment for Israel, for the region, and for the world. And he's coming here to do the following. First, the President will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
Well, now these machines that I was talking about, the Eisenhower and the Gerald R. Ford, Washington says these massive warships are intended to send a message to the region as war rages on between its ally Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian terrorist Hamas. Here's a closer look at what that means.
The Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the Eastern Mediterranean, the Ford carrier and the Eisenhower carrier, along with their supporting ships. Washington says these massive warships are intended to send a message to the region as war rages on between its ally Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian militants Hamas. Here's a closer look at what that means. The Gerald R. Ford carrier is the U.S.'s newest aircraft carrier and the world's largest. It holds 5,000 sailors, a nuclear reactor, and an arsenal of missiles used to counter drones and aircraft. It can also hold more than 75 military aircraft, including fighter jets, and comes along with several supporting warships. The nuclear-powered Dwight Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group first carried out operations during Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. It has 5,000 sailors and can carry up to 9 squadrons of aircraft, like fighter jets, helicopters, and those capable of carrying out intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations. The carriers would bolster Washington's presence in a region that already hosts a number of U.S. military ships, planes, and troops. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Sunday the aircraft carriers are not meant to be a provocation but a deterrence to ensure the conflict does not expand throughout the region. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called them a sign of, quote, our resolve to deter any state or non-state actor seeking to escalate this war. But it might not be seen that way to others. Turkey, a long supporter of a 2-state solution, has said the ships are meant to commit, quote, serious massacres in the Gaza Strip. And Iran has already threatened significant damages to the U.S. should the war escalate.
Well, we're going to continue with our focus on what's happening in Israel. Meanwhile, let's shift our attention to the fallout of global warming and climate change. Well, the Amazon River fell to its lowest level in over a century this week. This as a severe drought continues to upend life in the Brazilian rainforest. It has left boats stranded, cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages. The port of Manaus recorded 44.6 feet of water on Monday, compared to 57.7 feet just a year ago. That is the lowest level since records began in 1902. Rapidly drying tributaries to the mighty Amazon have left boats completely stranded. Take a look at that. Cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages, while high water temperatures are suspected of killing more than 100 endangered river dolphins. Now, the drought has affected about 4.8 lakh people, according to the Civil Defense Agency, in the state of Amazonas, where Manaus is located.
I came to announce resources for high and medium complexity healthcare for the Amazonian population and also for basic care, which today also has the reinforcement of MICE medicos and multidisciplinary teams.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for you in this edition of today's update. That's all the time Nancy and I have for you. News9 is going to continue to bring you all the developments and details right out of the Gaza Strip. Don't go anywhere.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage, 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, and you're watching me on First Person on News9 Plus.